Today's topic is dynamic compliance reporting and risk mapping with compliance. The final webinar of this insightful series is scheduled on 8th of December 2016 on Thursday, and it will focus around charting out robust and innovative strategies for dynamic compliance officers. For today's insightful session, we have the speakers, Chairman of Confident Governance, Bhavesh Bhagat, and CEO and founder of Crossland Advisors Inc., J. Crossland. So, Bhavesh, if you can please introduce yourself. Over to Bhavesh.
Thank you, Sandy, and welcome everyone for sharing 30 minutes of your valuable afternoon with us. I'm one of the co-founders and chairman of Confident Governance, where we essentially are inventors of governance as a service, which is a patent-pending approach of delivering agile compliance and governance anywhere, anytime, and on any device in a very flexible fashion. And we are very excited to also have one of our partners, Mr. J. Crossland, with us. So, Jay, welcome, and why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Bhavesh, and welcome to everybody who's attending. I have a 39-year career in financial management, internal audit, and advisory services across almost every industry. And prior to forming Crossland Advisors, I spent 18 years with Ernst & Young. I've seen many organizations struggle with compliance reporting, and I have assisted organizations in developing and streamlining their enterprise risk management processes and methodologies.
Welcome, Jay, and we are really excited to be presenting this webinar on agile compliance reporting and how to take compliance and link it with ERM. And just like Jay, we partner with many experts in this industry, and we will be sharing some of our insights in the next 30 minutes with you. So as Sandy indicated, the registration for the next webinar, which is the fourth and the final in this series, and due to really good feedback that we've received for ConfidentNow webinar series, we'll be conducting another topic in future on this type of subjects, such as enterprise risk management, cloud computing, board level reporting, so on and so forth. And we look for your feedback on topics that you would like us to cover on that. So the agenda for today is really to summarize some of the things that we've covered in the past two webinars, look at the current state of compliance reporting, leveraging agility in that reporting lifecycle for dynamic compliance, and then how to take compliance and scale it up now to enterprise risk management and some best practices around that. That's kind of our game plan for the next 30 minutes. And so the key takeaway after spending this brief introduction on this subject is you will learn about how to strategize for making your compliance reporting agile and how to make it efficient. And that's kind of the next step. I think, Jay, why don't you talk about the top challenges that we faced in summary of the last webinars that we've covered?
Sure, and for those of you who have joined us for the first webinar, we talked about the top compliance challenges, which we listed here are rapid velocity of change, lack of transparency, and shifting focus to keep up with evolving risks. Rapid velocity of change includes workforce demographics, technology, and the regulatory environment. The lack of transparency deals with visibility and continuity, inadequate or inconsistent reporting, and dispersed compliance data across the organization. And the shifting focus relates to compliance efforts that are not keeping pace with the constantly changing risks.
Excellent. And I think, so those are the top three struggles that chief compliance officers and the board are facing from a risk and compliance perspective. And really the way to tackle that we covered in our past webinar is by infusing some of the best practices for agility into compliance lifecycle, such as collaboration, mapping, using some latest technologies for risk into this lifecycle, and we'll talk about that also today. Centralizing your data for compliance and risk in one place, and then making this whole process scalable and intuitive for end users to interact with it in a dynamic fashion. So that's kind of the ground we've covered so far. And that takes us to the topic for today, which is what is the current state of compliance reporting? Because after centralizing all the data, after putting the right platform for automated life cycle for compliance, ultimately the rubber hits the road on reporting. And so the question, Jay, is what are you seeing in terms of the reporting for compliance and its current state in your experience so far?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I've seen a lot of highly manual processes that are used for accumulating information from dispersed sources throughout an organization. And the actual reporting that they're doing to management and the board is typically Word tables and PowerPoint slides. So it's a lot of information, not easy for anyone to focus on anything specific. The concern is how complete and incomprehensive is it because it's a manual process? Is it too detailed or too high level for the intended audience? I've seen reams of information given to the board and watch their eyes glaze over as they're trying to figure out, where do they focus their attention. And on the other side, I see them asking a lot of questions because they've been giving a too high level of document that really doesn't suit their needs and as a result of additional questions for follow-up.
Yeah, and I think those are some excellent points. So what I often see, Jay, is it is very difficult to find that right balance, as you suggested, between drilling down into details and then also presenting compliance reporting data in a more executive summary fashion for the busy board type of information consumption folks. And you simply cannot do that right balance unless you automate and use some agile type of approach because the Excel and Word simply cannot give you that flexibility. Either the data is too static or it's only going to be just point in time. And so that's kind of the challenge that we see, and you lay this global perspective that you see on the slide. This problem of reporting is not just limited to USA or one region, but compliance reporting efficiency is essentially a problem for any company anywhere in the world. And the more you go into lesser developed countries, the more manual the processes and procedures, and the more costlier the compliance requirements are. And so to the extent that you automate this life cycle, I think it is to the advantage of anyone who's dealing with reporting challenges in this problem. And so the question is, if that's the challenge, how can we make it more efficient? And that's only through the use of this concept of agility that Confident Governance really was invented for. And so everything that you do within the platform is for making the life cycle of that process agile. And the only way you can do that is when you deliver governance as a service, as we've invented, on any time, any device, and anywhere type of mindset. And so even the compliance reporting then automatically becomes anytime, anywhere, and any device. And so what you see is some of the qualities that we described for agile compliance in our last discussion, such as collaboration dynamically on your mobile phone and your Android or iPhone type of capability. The dashboard is pushed on your phone, and then you click and drill down on your phone in real time, whether you are on a metro stop or as I was flying back from Asia into USA yesterday, whether you're at an airport or at some place in another country. There's really no excuse to say that you did not know about some control or a risk that your company or the board was facing, or that you had to test some control. So everything is at your fingertips. And a lot of the chief executives and board level folks, if they are not tech savvy, they are very familiar with iPad and some tablet like that on which they read a newspaper, for example. And so we deliver these type of compliance reporting in a very easy to consume fashion for that type of audience on an iPad or on any device that they are familiar with. And for the normal end user, again, they can access it on the fly in the field on these mobile devices, or even through the laptops without installing any extra software or hardware procurement. And so that's the power of this type of approach. Now, the question is, okay, if we make the reporting agile, what does it gain? And I think the key is for any agile reporting, you have to understand the need of the audience that's going to consume that report. And one of the questions, Jay, is what do the board wants to see in terms of visual aspects of compliance or risk management reporting? What is your experience in terms of what the board likes to see?
Yeah, again, going back to my prior comment of the love it being a Word document or PowerPoint slides, there might be some color, but I mean, again, you think about how busy these board members are with their normal daily jobs, and plus, multiple boards and things and the responsibilities that they have. They don't have time to read a lot of information, so the more that can be focused to their attention, so colors and graphs and things like that are ideal, which I don't see a lot of. I see a lot of words in most of the presentations that I'm seeing. And then also the key with that is the ability to be able to drill down at any given time. So if they do have questions during a presentation and they're looking at the information, can it be drilled down easily to get to the detail and be able to answer the questions? But yeah, having the visual, I think, is highly important that I'm not seeing much of in the industry right now.
Excellent point. I think you also bring another key point, Jay, of the drill down ability. And so almost any compliance report, if it's not having that drill down functionality, is pretty much a moot point if you just show an Excel in a PowerPoint. And so what really Confident Governance does is not only are the dashboards really completely code-free or easy to consume for a non-technical person, you can drag and drop and change sizes of pictures from a funnel or bar or pie to whatever else you would like to see it as. And that's important because each person from a visual point of reporting and data consumption is different. And so each person is essentially familiar with one shape, and they like to see data either as a bar chart or pie chart, and different board members might have different preferences. So if you know that a platform like this can help you in massaging your data in a real-time fashion to make it more pleasing for the person that you're having that discussion with. And now, I think coming back to, Jay, your point on drilling down, that's crucial because what a lot of systems don't do is they, number one, don't allow you to drill down into the real field level risk and control, which is what we do, but then we go even beyond, where we've connected the data with the actual physical location and the geospatial intelligence of Google Earth and some of the latest techniques out there. So now you can see, as you are seeing on the screen, your risks pinpointed across the globe, and when you zoom in, you actually see the Google Earth building and the actual address where this risk is located with the exact floor and all that stuff. So if it's being mapped in Google Earth, you are able to see precisely the location anywhere in the world of your control or risk and that particular data point that's happening for your compliance. And so these are the kind of unique, agile, and very powerful features that you need to have for improving your compliance reporting. Now, the other point that I would like to make is, as Jay mentioned, some of the existing companies are just not there at all. They are using manual tools. And on the flip side, there are some very large companies who actually we work with who have legacy ERP systems like SAP or Oracle and some really massive complex ERP systems. Now, even those systems have some type of risk management, but it is nowhere as agile or capable as what we are describing. There is not a single system that we can see which takes your risks and maps it to Google Earth that we know of so far and does it in a dynamic, really easy fashion for the end user like what we are describing. So all these things are very important as you start thinking of making your compliance lifecycle easy. And what you can see is essentially you have to take your compliance and then gain efficiencies by focusing on not just compliance but on policy management, on framework management for best practices like COSO or NIST and so on and so forth. And so each of these things, once you do, you can start in any one area and then your reporting then can integratedly scale into other areas once you start mapping all these controls and risks to different best practices and frameworks. And that kind of takes us to our next final subject of today's discussion, which is, okay, now that we made compliance more efficient and automated, and then we've applied some best practices for making our compliance reporting much more agile and dynamic, how can we take next steps to improve this life cycle further? And I think the next natural step for all companies who start with compliance is really take that foundation of compliance and then build it up to risk management and enable enterprise risk management with what they've achieved in compliance. So what are you, Jay, seeing in terms of the mapping between compliance and ERM? How have you seen some companies take advantage of compliance and then have they been able to implement ERM afterwards, or do you see usually companies starting with ERM and then focusing on compliance, or vice versa? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think in every case, compliance is a requirement. They have to do that. That has to be done. Otherwise, they could have penalties and fines and things like that. So, those who have done an ERM or enterprise risk management exercise or have a process in place, compliance, if they lay out their primary risks, compliance is always going to be one of the top 5 risks, along with cybersecurity and privacy and vendor management. But again, if you look at all those top risks, compliance is only one that they really have to do it no matter what. So that's showing up every time.
Yeah, and I think so what we see is one of the key things that's really lacking in many cases is companies, number one, have to comply. So yes, they comply, but then their ERM is really not structured. So different departments like legal or sometimes internal audit or some department like that is leading charge on enterprise risk management in some way, shape, or form. But that focus is not really driven as a formal program. It's more ad hoc. And almost in all cases we've seen, there is no clear aggregation of risk at the enterprise level. In large companies, they do this enterprise risk exercise, but then it's so massive that it becomes a moot point and it becomes static because you do that exercise in a really massive fashion. You can't repeat it and keep the data fresh. The key with building a good risk universe, again, as I keep using that phrase, is agility, because you can't look at risk universe in isolation. You have to understand it once, and then you have to keep revisiting that every 6 months, every year at least, and then make sure that you are on top of your risk universe. And this picture is pretty appropriate because the risk universe of companies is changing as we speak. People with technological improvements are now not only focusing on their internal risks, but you really have to focus on industry risks and what's happening in the world around us. And before you know it, people will be flying to Mars and other planets, and companies will be conducting business related to some of these things. So that's not 500 years away. That's basically going to happen in next 10 years, 20 years, or sooner. Who knows? But
Yeah.
the point
Just
is,
to add to that too.
yeah.
Just to add to that too, Bhavesh, when we did one of the first webinars, we talked about the challenges that compliance faces, and really ERM has the same challenges. There's no formal process or methodology. Who's, like you mentioned, who's running it in the organization? Is it legal? Is it internal audit? Is it decentralized or centralized? Do they really have the resources allocated to do it? Is the entire organization representative? And how are risk evaluated? Like you mentioned, they might have a massive list of risks. I have a client now that went through the exercise probably like 5 years ago or 7 years ago and came up with a massive list of risks, but they only focused on the top 10 or 15 out of maybe 400 or something. So, it begs the question, what about these others? Are they just not applicable anymore? But the organization just doesn't have the time or the tools to really monitor anything but the top 5 or 10.
And that's, I think you bring an excellent point, and we see that time and again. Again, like you said, this client did it 5, 7 years ago, and that's almost the case every single time a company has 500, sometimes thousands of risks, and they've looked at those and collected that aggregated risk portfolio maybe 2, 3, 4 years ago. And then since then, no one has looked at it. They've done bare minimum to comply with some stuff. But I think the next step in these type of situations is really it's not cost prohibitive now with technologies like Confident Governance to load all of those risks into one place and then start mapping exactly like what we are discussing, your risk universe with your compliance universe. And then you start suddenly seeing quantification. And that's kind of the next slide, which is pretty interesting. Survey was done recently by Compliance Week publication. And the question was, do you quantify and track the economic cost of non-compliance, such as fines, sanctions, and other kind of non-compliance related activities that you might have to do? And what was interesting is only 1/3 of the survey audience actually tracked some kind of non-compliance cost. So they essentially, to say it in other words, they know what the cost of non-compliance for them is. And so therefore they are putting the right focus on complying and building systems that can help them achieve their objective. 2/3 of the companies, for different reasons, either do not know or they do not track the cost of non-compliance. And so essentially, if you have no clue what this cost is of, if you don't comply, what is it going to cost to you? If you have a major issue, what are the fines going to be? Then you're always shooting in the dark, and that's a really bad situation to be in. So before you even think of ERM, you've got to quantify this stuff. And I think what Confident Governance allows you to do is, in a case like Jay's description, that company is going to upload and load all of their risks, quantify, analyze all of their risks in one place, and then you don't have to test all of them or comply with all of them. You start only doing with the top 5, 10, but everything is in one place, and now you start prioritizing your data, and you start reporting on that from a priority basis and build a multi-year roadmap for continuously evolving your risk universe. That's, I think, the best practice, but that best practice also gives you quantifiable data with numbers that you can rely on. And these kind of techniques you must deploy because, as I'm showing in my next slide, digital innovation is the new normal. So I think for those companies who have no clue of this quantification or who don't have any automation, pretty much they are going to be hit with some kind of negative activity or event in the next 5 to 7 years, because I'm giving you an example. This is from Greece. I was there last year, and it's pretty interesting where what you see in the background is Acropolis, the 1,000-year-old, many thousands years old architectural wonder. That's where the architecture movement began with all the Greek columns and stuff like that. And so I was staying in this hotel right across in Athens where you can see this. And at the vantage point in the restaurant up there in the terrace, they have this selfie spot. And I can assure you when Acropolis was built, there was no word called selfie that existed. But then what was even more interesting is while I was there was also a drone that I spotted either from a government or some photographer type of person probably taking some pictures. But even that didn't exist. And so here, if I'm Acropolis, I'm witnessing all these things that never I could have imagined 1,000 years in advance. But all of these things are happening. And now you can imagine instead of Acropolis, if on that hill you have a plant where you're manufacturing your next prototype or something that your competitors might not like, and then you have a drone flying around taking some pictures, or someone is just taking some pictures and sending that digital data across to some other channels that you might not want to. So the point is, all these type of risks never existed thousands of years ago. They do now, and you don't even have to look back 1,000 years ago or look ahead 1,000 years ago. Just in next 5 years, the same drone now is going to automatically talk to your phone, and then you'll be able to not only control the drone, but the drone will be able to send you precise intelligence on where to go next and what to do and all that type of stuff. These are all real life situations where companies have to deal with. And so if you are not understanding these new use cases of technology and digital innovation, and you are not building your risk universe to understand what are the new areas where you have to comply with or you have to start thinking about 5 years in advance, I think you'll be in a tough spot. And so that takes us to our final point, which is monitoring all these new things is very important, because when we talk about enterprise risk management, most companies look at enterprise risk within their four walls. And what we see is you have to essentially take your risk and look at it from outside in point of view. And that's what we do in Confident Governance with our social risk management, where we take the enterprise risks that you have and then we look at and track them from Twitter and Facebook and some of these other social channels, because they give you new intelligence from the same risks perspective, but it's a perspective coming from outside versus just inside your four walls. And so as you start thinking of compliance, you have to now start thinking of being creative, because it's not a painful, boring exercise, which is what most people think risk management and compliance are very painful and boring. So what we want to do is make it creative, and when you make it creative and forward-looking, that's the best way of mapping compliance with ERM. And so I'm wondering, Jay, if you have any point on that mapping, and then that kind of takes us to the end where I think, Sandy, I would pass it back to you and see if you have any questions. So, Jay, do you have any final thoughts on mapping of ERM with compliance?
Yeah, I think, like I said, compliance has to be done. So if a company hasn't gone through an enterprise risk management process, at a minimum, they're trying somehow to deal with their compliance. It may still be a struggle, again, because of the diverse nature, depending on the type of industry. So ERM is a great source and a great process to make sure you're keeping your compliance efforts in check. Again, but like your picture of the Acropolis and all, what I'm seeing is there's pretty much archaic tools being used for the ERM processes, and as well as compliance processes in most organizations. And they're not, while their risk might be keeping their risk universe might be keeping pace to some extent, their technology for the whole process is definitely not keeping pace.
Excellent. So I think, Sandy, do we have any questions? I think we are at the end of the webinar at this point, and we have a couple of minutes for taking on any questions.
Yes, we have a question from the audience which says, Does the proposed agile approach of compliance reporting have an inbuilt database of compliance risk? And if yes, do we need to frequently update this database, or there is an auto-update option?
Okay, it's a good question. Do these agile compliance tools have a database of risks, and then are these risks updated in real time? So the answer is yes, absolutely. When you implement Confident Governance or any platform like ours, uh, essentially a good platform would give you a basic starter set, which is what we do. And besides any publicly known best practices and risks and rules that you get, we also have a governance center of excellence where we research these risks in real time, and on a periodic basis we publish updates for you which you can subscribe to. So we do the hard work for you and then you get that. What are you seeing, Jay, in this in terms of updating the risk database and making it dynamic? Are you seeing that often?
Not too often. I mean, a lot of those who have an enterprise risk management process, they may start with either a clean sheet of paper, or they delved into some of the whatever their industry periodicals that were available, maybe to give them some general risks to get as a starting point. But even any database, whether it's the one that's provided with the agile tools or it's some other research done, again, it's just like you said, it's a starting point. You have to customize that to your organization. Which is what most companies have done that, at least. They've taken some basic thing, either they did from scratch, or they took a basic list and then they did customize it to their own industry, their own organization. But nothing that's really updated on a regular basis either, other than maybe once a year they get together and say, anybody have any new risks we want to put on the list, and that's basically the process.
Yeah, and that's excellent because what we found in the industry is that doesn't exist. So we essentially publish these, just like McAfee does these antivirus updates. We have these regulatory updates and business rules updates based on industry, and so that gives you a good starting point. And then someone has to work with a partner like Crossland Advisors or on any one of these other partners that we work with who are experts. So that kind of excellent question, thanks. And then Sandy, that takes us to the end. Do we have any other questions, or we can wrap up at that point?
Yes, we can wrap up. So attendees can pose their question to bb@confidentgovernance.com or sandy.carter@confidentgovernance.com and j.crossland@crosslandadvisors.com. And thanks everyone for joining this exciting discussion. And thanks Bhavesh and Jay for this wonderful insights on compliance reporting. And
thank you. Yep. Yeah, thanks, Sandy, and we look forward to having you in our next webinar on December 8th. So you can register for it on the registration link that was shared, and then will also be emailed to you separately, and it will be socialized on our website and other channels. Thank you, Jay, for your excellent insights, and with that, we want to wrap up today's webinar and hope you all have a wonderful afternoon.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, Bhavesh and Jay.